Well, welcome, folks. We are back again to take a look at this last bit here. We left off here where I've got this highlighted the last time. We're studying the basically this book, which goes into the Lilith theory, and it explains some things that are otherwise left unexplained. In particular, it explains us why the high priest would lay his hands upon the scapegoat and pronounce Azazel for Azazel. Who's Azazel? What's the significance? What is the significance for the sins of mankind? This book goes into all of that detail, and it talks about this particular demon, Lilith, and how she was in the garden and how she deceived Eve. And if you would like, you can join this study. I put the Zoom room in there. It seems like every time this thing keeps getting knocked off of its spot, but it's a good thing I've got it saved here. So before I get started here, I want to make sure I've got the scripture thing open. I like to use this particular scripture set here. Okay. Shouldn't have to do that every time, hopefully. Okay. So, all right, so I'm going to continue on here. To explain this, he provides a riddle using Ecclesiastes 4:1. We'll take a look at that for real quick here, but I want to sort of put this into some one of these groups. All right, so basically what's going on here is this is basically a talk about what are the other sources that seem to mention about Lilith? And so to explain this, he provides a riddle using Ecclesiastes 4:1. In it, Solomon bemoans that people who are oppressed had tears and they had no comforter. Solomon then goes on to note the oppressors had power, but they too had no comforter. This Ecclesiastes 4:1 say, I returned and considered all the oppressions that are done under the sun, and behold, the tears of such are as were oppressed, and they had no comforter. And on the side of their oppressors there was power, but they had no comforter. The old man then explains that the strength of the conceived spirit is the reason why sinful Lilith sometimes slays it and sometimes not. He notes that as in Ecclesiastes 4:1, neither sinful Lilith, the oppressor, nor the spirit of the child, the oppressed, had a comforter. This comforter is a protective spirit. Interesting that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, is called the comforter. Thus, sinful Lilith was vulnerable to the child's conceived spirit, and likewise the child's conceived spirit was vulnerable to sinful Lilith. When the conceived seed was of defilement, like the menstrual woman or the adulterous soda, then sinful Lilith prevailed, and she killed the conceived seed. When the conceived seed was the promised seed of the innocents, like the woman who distresses her husband, interesting, or the innocent woman of the soda trial who causes her husband's jealousy, then it prevails over sinful Lilith. She cannot slay it. Instead, both the seed and sinful Lilith are taken to the altar with the woman's minka barley offering. There, the first promised seed is accepted by Yahweh as a sacrifice. In doing so, it crushes the head of sinful Lilith and carries away all the sin and curses in the waters. Afterwards, this first promised seed is miraculously revived before Yahweh. When this innocent woman drinks a second time, there are no curses in the waters. The seed which enters her through her drinking is her second promised seed, which is anxiety in her husband, because she has delayed in providing her marital visits to him. These two, let's see if we can get this out of the way here. It's kind of in my way. There we go. Okay. These two women mirror the two types of women who undergo the bitter water trial. The first woman, who was defiled by the blood of her impurity, mirrors the guilty Sota, who was defiled by her adultery. The second woman, who causes her husband anxiety, corresponds to the innocent woman of the bitter water trial. Both have done nothing wrong except taking actions that provoke anxietyness or jealousy in their husbands. According to the old man's cryptic response, we see that both the guilty Sota and the innocent woman of the bitter trial conceive supernatural seed due to the spirit of Lilith. This is in keeping with the results of the bitter water code. Now, what is it talking about here? It's actually talking about the bitter water trial, which is found in the book of Numbers, where a man has a wife, and he suspects his wife of committing adultery against him. Then he's to take her to the priest, and basically through all the back and forth discussions, the man just refuses to relent and says, "Look, I just know she stepped out on me." And so there's this elaborate ceremony written in the book of Numbers. And so that's what this has to do with. Both have done nothing wrong. Okay, so let's see here. The voice of the serpent also joins unto this innocent woman because she undergoes the trial's rigors and curses, just as does the guilty woman. Moreover, as the old man explains in passage 3:18, this woman is probably not entirely innocent, for she has probably done something that has provoked her husband's jealousy. In passage 3:19, the rabbis ask the old man why it should matter if the voice of the serpent is caught up with the voice of the woman. The old man then responds that when the voice of the serpent mingles with the voice of the woman, then when the evil and simple Lilith come out of her lair, she is heated by those voices. And Lilith conceives seed. Note these two spirits of Lilith mentioned here, sinful Lilith and evil Lilith. This is because clear in the subsequent passages in the bitter water trial, I hold that these two spirits correspond to the same spirit that has the opportunity to enter the woman upon each of her two drinking of bitter waters. Sinful Lilith corresponds to the first drinking. Both the innocent woman and the defiled Sota drink of her. Evil Lilith corresponds to the second drinking. This is the deadly Lilith, and only the defiled Sota drinks of her. So if a woman is innocent of adultery, even though her husband thinks she's an adulteress, she is not harmed by the second drinking of the cup that the priest gives to her. Only the guilty one, and there's a curse associated with the guilty one. The innocent woman's second drinking is of a cleansed waters. The old man continues in passage 3:19. He states that after Lilith conceives her seed, she follows its spirit into the intestines of the woman. In passage 3:20, the old man states that the sinful Lilith shows up first and plays with the spirit of the child. However, she is not the permanent mother of the child. Evil Lilith, when and if she arrives, is the permanent mother. The old man says that the sinful Lilith is but a let's see, we'll get this out of here. Is but a messenger of the evil Lilith to come. The old man's response is based on the bitter water trial. The old man's sinful Lilith is considered a temporary messenger because her cursing is that of the first waters drank in the bitter waters trial. This cursing is taken away from the water. Let's see, taken away from the woman of the trial when her minka barley offering is taken to the altar. So basically, it's part of this elaborate ceremony, the bitter water trial in the book of Numbers. So this is in the Bible. However, if the defiled woman drinks a second time, when evil Lilith comes in the waters, the woman's cursing shall not depart. Lilith shall stay and slay the woman and her seed. The old man explains these mysteries to the rabbis by providing yet another riddle in passage 3:20. He states that sinful Lilith often slays the seed she follows into the intestines of the woman, but not always. To explain this, he provides a riddle using Ecclesiastes 4:1. In it, Solomon bemoans that people who were oppressed had tears and they had no comforter. Solomon then goes on to note the oppressors had power, but they too had no comforter. So this is in Ecclesiastes, same thing. Let's see here. What am I missing here? It seems like I might have there we go. For some reason that didn't continue on. I think I'm not sure where I messed up here, but I'm going to try to rectify that. Not working too well, is it? Okay, okay, so let me start on down here. I think I repeated something that I shouldn't have repeated. It was already done. All right, so thus simple Lilith was vulnerable to the child's conceived spirit, and likewise the child's conceived spirit was vulnerable to the child's conceived spirit. Let's move on down here. When the conceived seed was of defilement, like the menstrual woman or the adulterous soda, then simple Lilith prevailed and she killed the conceived seed. I know what happened. I tried to change the page here, and it did not change for me. So basically, I was reading all of this, which I had already read before. So I apologize for that, guys. What I need to do is make sure we are on another page when I do this. This particular Kindle is not working very well. Okay, so when the conceived seed was of a defilement, like the menstrual woman or the adulterous soda, then sinful Lilith prevailed and she killed the conceived seed. When the conceived seed was the promised seed of innocent, like the woman who distresses her husband or the innocent woman. I think I read all the way down here. Now we need to get to the right page. That's not the right page. Come on. All right. Numbers 15:28. Evil Lilith does not come after this second seed, for there is no curses in the waters, and even if she did come, she would have no power over it, just as sinful Lilith had no power over the first. Okay, in Passages 3:22, the old man reveals to the two rabbis more supernatural mechanics of the trial. He states that sinful Lilith lies at the door like a dog, and when the woman's voices reach out just before she is to conceive, sinful Lilith rushes out after that voice. The old man explains that this is so because just at that instant, Yahweh sends a key to open the womb of the woman. This is the key of life. And thus sinful Lilith goes after it. She then enters the belly of the woman and bites it, injecting the venom of her curses. This poison shall remain until the woman is cleansed from the filth of the bite. And that might be, I wonder if that has to do with every child having the fallen nature within them. That's an interesting thing. Isn't that an interesting thing? The old man concludes that the glory of Yahweh, Yahweh bring about fitting actions about the situation, namely the defiled soda shall not be cleansed of the poison, shall be destroyed by the curses, whereas the innocent woman shall be cleansed or redeemed from the curses. In Passages 3:23, the old man reveals more and links this his riddle firmly to the mysteries of the soda trial. He states the secret to the woman who survives the trial is that the serpent has been rejected from her belly. The serpent can distress her for a while, but it is ultimately shunned from the womb. He then reveals that the serpent can dominate the belly of the soda. He quotes Numbers 5:27, which states her belly shall swell. He explains that the serpent acts with vengeance, as this belly is his to do with what he wishes. Okay, so that is, let's take a look at Numbers 5:27. Okay, so see if I can get this out of the way here. And when he hath made her drink the water, then it shall come to pass that if she be defiled and have done trespass against her husband, this is the one that is actually adulterous, and she denies being an adulteress. But this trial finds her out, that the water that causes the curse shall enter into her and become bitter, and her belly shall swell, and her thigh shall rot, and the woman shall be a curse among her people. Interesting. Now, actually, the rabbis teach that she dies, like in a supernatural shriveling up in death. And I don't know I don't know whether it's instant, like really fast, or whether it's slowly she just dies eventually of some horrible condition that she develops. Okay, okay, so her belly shall swell. He explains that the serpent acts with vengeance, as this belly is his to do with what he wishes. As we have seen in this section, the Zohar teaches a mystical role for Lilith in the Bitterwater trial of the Soda. That is much in line with the encoded messages revealed in the Bitterwater Code. She is the spirit of cursing in the trial, and the centerpiece of the trial is her epic struggle against the woman's seed. If she prevails, the Bitterwater curses overcome the woman and her seed. If Lilith fails, her head is crushed by the woman's seed sacrifice. Interesting. And the innocent woman bears a replacement promised seed. So this is interesting. It's another interpretation of what's in Genesis. That Genesis scripture, very interesting there to consider. Okay, so right now we have a summary of the Zohar. Basically, these are just, now remember the Zohar, we don't consider that scripture, but it is instructive in that it seems to give some understanding, or at least an explanation of some of these very strange elements in the book of Numbers, particularly the Bitterwater trial. And let me do something real quick here. Okay, so this is a brief summary of what the Zohar says about Lilith. Passage reference conventions are according to an online version of the Zohar that may be found, and here it is right here. So passage 251, we discover that according to the Zohar, that Lilith is a female demon who pursues and kills the wicked spirits of children spawned by defiling sexual acts. Interesting. Okay, so, and then this is in Genesis passages, basic passages here. It says, Lilith is described as a klipa, or a shell, emerging from a common origin with Adam's klipa. While Adam's klipa concealed the perfect light of Yahweh, Lilith's klipa concealed the defective light of Lucifer. Lilith is completed before Adam. After awakening, she ascends and attempts to have intercourse with the angels, but when Adam is finished, she descends to the earth to have intercourse with him. Now, that's interesting. I didn't think that that was part of the narrative, but that's what the Zohar says. Okay. However, she sees Eve attached to Adam's side and flees from him, attempting to have sex with angels once more. Yahweh then dispatches her to the depths of the sea, where she dwelt until Adam and his wife sin. She rules over all the infants who deserve to be punished because of the sins of their fathers. Now, that's a bit harsh there. I'm not sure. See, just take this stuff with a grain of salt. It's not scriptural, but the whole point of the study is to try to explain the Bitterwater trial, to try to explain some very strange passages. And it's just one explanation that tries to sort through these things, okay? All right, so she dwells at the gates of the Garden of Eden by the flaming sword because she originated from the side of that flame. Adam had a female counterpart named Lilith before Eve existed, and Lilith conceived from Adam. Isn't that something? It says Lilith conceived from Adam. I wonder if that's where the serpent seed teaching comes from. Lilith was not to be trusted and was not suitable for Adam. The rib that remained to Adam still symbolized Lilith, who stayed with him. And Lilith is the mother of the mixed multitude, and her spirit is present in the nakedness left when Yahweh's holy covering spirit is departed due to defiling sexual acts. Wow. Lilith was created to bring curses to the world. That's something. All right, so this is in another part of Genesis. Naamah, sister of Tubal-Cain, was a mother of demons who was linked with Lilith. Both killed children. Lilith empowered Naamah. Demons die like humans, but Lilith and Naamah possess some unique power that they continue to live on the earth until a future date when Yahweh shall cleanse them from the earth. Interesting. Okay, so this is Vayetz is basically, that's the name of a Torah portion. Samael and Lilith are intimately linked, male and female, together like one being. That's something. Okay, so Vayishlach, so the spirit of the defilement comes from the corrupt serpent, which is Lilith. Mishpatim, Passages 43, 319. Okay, so the souls of young children who suckle on their mother's strength are given over to the power of Lilith. Lilith is compared to the bondwoman Hagar and her son, whom Sarah cast out of the household for idolatry. Now that's interesting. Now that's something that Genesis does not say, but isn't that something? I want to get that highlighted if I can. All right. I don't know how the rest of this got made brown. Or okay, so the bondwoman is equated to idolatry. Verse 319, Lilith is the driving spirit causing the curse of the Soda's bitter water trial. She and the voice of the serpent are responsible for the mystical insemination of the seed, and it is the spirit of Lilith that slays the defiled mystical seed. However, Lilith is overcome by the spirit of that innocent woman's promised seed. There are two spirits of Lilith in the trial, sinful Lilith and evil Lilith. Sinful Lilith is associated with the woman's first drinking. Evil Lilith comes if the woman is defiled and drinks again. Interesting here that Lilith is called the female of Samael. Now, I had a little discussion with somebody in Torah study today and Shabbat study. And, they were talking about, well, who's the serpent in the garden? I just assumed that, he said, well, it's Satan. Well, some people believe Samael is Satan. And so if this is a being that's inhabited by this, that's in conjunction with the spirit of Satan or Samael, then he might have been right too. We might have been both right. On creation day 5, Yahweh said, let the waters swarm with every living creature that moves. This means everything swarmed at the same time, allowing the good waters of Yahweh to intermix with the evil waters of Samael. This allowed both the good and evil creatures to come to and exist at the same time. It was likewise with Lilith's creation, the perfect light of Yahweh intermixed with Samael's defective light. The light of one spread into the other. Adam became a good living creature, and Lilith became an evil living creature. Okay, so this is now Tetzaveh is another Torah portion name. Interesting. Okay, so whoever has not removed filth from his soul on Yom Kippur, his prayer ascends on that day and sinks into a place that is called mud and clay, which are Samael and Lilith. This provides a clear link to Lilith and Yom Kippur. Interesting. So, okay, so Samael is portrayed as riding his evil spirit Lilith to bring down Adam. The serpent is compared to a deceitful harlot. Lucifer gives power to Lilith, and she practices the art of deception in the world. They cannot rule the one without the other. Okay, passage 207 interprets Genesis 2:23 as I do, namely, that Adam declares Eve as the result of a second attempt to make a helpmeet for him. Vanity in a man empowers Lilith to ensnare him. Okay, so here's another passage, Vayikra. Lilith was created just before Adam. When 1,000 spirits attempted to enter Adam, but were rebuked by Yahweh. A husband and a wife must take special precautions during sex to protect themselves from Lilith. A wife should not suckle her child and have intercourse near the same location. Interesting. And those are some interesting things there. Okay, so Achremah, this is another Torah portion section. Male demon seed of Naamah appears to women in their dreams and inseminates with them with seed. These seed then proceed to Lilith, whom rears them. If a person is not holy but draws a spirit of defilement, then Lilith comes and plays with the child. If she kills him, she clings to the child's spirit and never lets go. However, if there is no defilement, Lilith can still come and slay the child, but its spirit is taken away by 3 holy spirits who take him to God. Okay, let's see. So that means that's interesting because apparently even in the Zohar, they believe that if a child passed away, they were taken to the presence of Elohim, right? Okay, so Israel must send their goat sacrifice to Jehovah on Yahweh on Yom Kippur by an unblemished man. This is in contrast to the goat Azazel, which is sent by a blemished man. This blemished man is compared to a major fault of heathen families. In this way, most heathen households are defective in respect to their wife, who is ruined, Lilith, blemished. Let's see here. The unclean mix multitudes of the world are called the children of Lilith, who is a woman in menstruation, a maidservant, a Gentile woman, and oppressor. These could all be allegories to being unclean. In Pincus, this is another Torah portion. If you ever read Torah portions, every section of scripture has a name. Pincus is Phineas. It's that section that means Phineas. Lilith is a wicked bondwoman that is insolent, has no humility, no modesty. She is the mother of the mixed multitude. Solomon refers to her when she says, a virtuous woman is a diadem to her husband, but she that acts shamefully is as rottenness in his bones. Furthermore, Lilith has neither humility nor modesty before Yahweh. Her children are similar, being a mixed multitude. In the future, Yahweh will remove her and her children from the world, for they are bastards, born of the 9 attributes, as described by the sages. The 9 attributes for which children are considered bastards by the Torah are a wife raped by her husband. Isn't that something? A wife hated, a woman menstruating at the time of intercourse, a wife whose husband at the time of intercourse thought she was someone else or his other wife. Well, that would make, isn't that something? A wife who is rebellious at the time of intercourse, a husband drunk at the time of intercourse, having intercourse with a wife divorced in her heart. Isn't that something? A wife who is insolent, a wife who has relations immediately prior to her marriage. Interesting. Lilith is a wicked bondwoman whose children are as a serpent, before whom is the whole land. As it is written, the dust shall be the serpent's food. Interesting. The dust shall be the serpent's food. He fears eating the dust until he is full, for he is afraid that there will not be enough for him. All right, Satan and his female Lilith are concerned about the sanctity of Yahweh's name. In passages, Samael is compared to the liver and Lilith to the appendix, which emerges from the liver. This is because of the liver emerges the gall, which is the sword of the angel of death, from which come bitter drops to kill human beings. It is written, her end is bitter. Interesting. Mara, as meaning gall, or as wormwood. This is that's in Proverbs 5:4. Let's take a look at that one, Proverbs 5:4. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's see here. My son, attend to my wisdom, bow thine ear to understanding, that you may regard discretion, and that thy lips may keep knowledge. For the lips of a strange woman drop as honeycomb, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But her end is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a 2-edged sword. Her feet go down to death, her steps take hold on hell. Lest you should ponder the path of life, her ways are movable, that thou canst not know them. Okay, so that is Proverbs 5:4. Lilith is called a woman of harlotry, comes out and emerges from Samael to mislead the word and denounce them. She leaves the male to practice prostitution. After making her adulterous union, she rises above him. She has a harlot's forehead and subdues her husband, who is Samael, with the anger of the gall, being a quarrelsome and anger-prone wife, rules over her male. Lilith is also compared to the spleen. Now remember, this is all coming from Jewish mystical text, and you got to take this with a grain of salt, but it's interesting to see what they say about and see if there's any connections in Scripture. Finally, Kitetse, Samael and his female Lilith were the servants of Elohim, but later made themselves into deities. Now that's interesting, because it says that Satan, wanted to ascend up on high. He wanted to be like Elohim. Remember, and that's what caused him to fall. Have you ever read that in the book of Isaiah? Okay, so Yahweh will remove them out of the world and wipe them away. Lilith is called filthy refuse because she is excrement with different types of filth and vermin, into which dead dogs and the uncircumcised are buried. She is a grave for idolatry. She is the reason the dead dogs, the uncircumcised, and the vermin become a bad smell. Interesting. All of that's just, I think that's poppycock, but anyway. All right, so we're out of that section now. We're starting something new. Azazel as the seed of Lilith. Now, I've never heard it explained why the high priest would say let Azazel in Hebrew. Well, it's to Azazel when he would commute all of the sins of Israel upon the scapegoat. And then a man, and according to this, a blemished man would lead that goat and throw it over a mountainside. And it would go hurtling down to die. And so this is the Day of Atonement ceremony, Yom Kippur. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. No study of Lilith would be complete without a discussion of Azazel. Azazel is a famous demon in 1st Enoch, the Zohar, and other ancient texts. He is even mentioned in the Bible in Leviticus. Today, Azazel is commonly assumed to be a watcher, thanks largely to the influence of 1st Enoch. Watchers were fallen angels who left their heavenly estate to have sexual relations with the daughters of Adam. And the results of these fornications were the Nephilim, a race of powerful angel-man hybrids. The 1st Enoch states nearly pushed ordinary mankind to extinction before the flood. So this is interesting. Welcome, Melissa. Very interesting subject here. In fact, in Torah study, I just had this discussion with the guy. We were going back and forth about this, and he's never read the book of Enoch. He doesn't know what's in it. I don't know how he interprets Genesis chapter 6, which says the sons of God came down and they went into the daughters of men and produced the race of giants. That's how it's put in the book of Genesis. Well, the only book that expands on this story is the book of Enoch. And Enoch says that these 200 watchers came down on Mount Hermon and they made a pact that they were going to go in and have sex with human women and produce children. Now, they broke a heavenly law. And because they did that, they were ascribed as unto demons. And Yahweh, it even says in the book of Enoch that they were begging Enoch to make intercession for them for their sin of mixing with mankind and producing the race of giants. And remember, the race of giants were reputedly a very violent race that basically almost snuffed out humanity completely. They were so, and this is where we get all of the legends of Atlantis. It's where we get the legends of Lemuria and all of these great nations that were highly technologically advanced, because these fallen angels, these watchers came down and taught mankind technology, things that they should not have taught them. And so because they were oppressing more and more through technology, mankind was nearly destroyed. I mean, look at where we are today because of technology. Now, technology used lawfully. I mean, I'm using technology now to make this video, but they were using technology to harm and oppress. See, so that's an interesting little side note there. So we're talking about a race of powerful angel-man hybrids. The 1st Enoch states nearly pushed ordinary mankind to extinction before the flood. So a careful study of all the ancient texts, including 1st Enoch, reveals that Azazel was not a watcher. Rather, he was a Nephilim seed of the watchers. Moreover, we shall see Azazel was no ordinary Nephilim. He was not born to the daughters of Adam like his brethren. Instead, he is the product of Lilith mating with Samjaza, the leader of the watchers. Okay, so I for a minute there, I think Samjaza could be another word for Samael. But maybe Samiel and Samjaza are separate. I'm not sure about that exactly, but thus Azazel was less human than all the other Nephilim and the most powerful. He was even more powerful than his father, Samjaza. Isn't that something? The Yom Kippur ceremony of Leviticus demonstrates that Azazel is a legendary seed of the serpent. Azazel's role in the ceremony identifies him as the rival to Messiah. Yahweh cursed the serpent that its seed would bruise the heel of Eve's promised seed. That would be Messiah, right? But Eve's seed in turn would crush the head of the serpent Lilith and destroy her seed. So Azazel precisely mirrors this foiling role in Yom Kippur. Furthermore, Yahweh heaped upon the serpent seed all the curses associated with the sins of Lilith and Lucifer in causing men to fall. This heaping of sins is repeated upon Azazel in Leviticus and 1st Enoch. In Leviticus, all the sins of Israel are placed upon the scapegoat sent to Azazel. 1st Enoch says in regard to Azazel, ascribe to him the whole sin. Identifying Azazel as the seed of the serpent, Lilith is largely a revolutionary idea outside of Zohar. Many who have not pondered the issue much may think the seed of the serpent is anti-Messiah and yet to come. However, this cannot be the case. The seed of the serpent has already worked his most dastardly deed. According to Scripture, the seed of the serpent must bruise the heel of Messiah. And that did happen. That was the crucifixion. This bruising was accomplished over 2,000 years ago in Messiah's self-immolation. That would be the crucifixion. The seed of the serpent must have existed at that time. And even John recognizes this fact when he says Antichrist shall come, and even now is Antichrist spirit in there, and there have been many Antichrists. Notice John talks about this principle. The seed of the serpent must have existed at that time. Any future Antichrist could be nothing more than a descendant or a reemergence of the infamous seed. And so there will be a final seed of the serpent in the end time. Undoubtedly, the biggest obstacle to proving Azazel is the seed of the serpent is dispelling popular misconceptions about its nature due to hasty conclusions drawn from 1st Enoch. First, because 1st Enoch, Azazel has long been considered a fallen watcher, at least outside of the Kabbalah. In 1st Enoch, Azazel suddenly appears after the watchers began cavorting with women. Readers naturally assume he is a late appearing watcher. This is an easy mistake to make, for even though Azazel appears late, when he does suddenly show up, he is always at the forefront of all the watchers' sins. Azazel also takes a dominant position over all the watchers, even over Semjaza, their leader. Scholars have attempted to explain this bizarre transition of prominence from Semjaza to Azazel by various unsatisfactory means. Some claim that later redactors of 1st Enoch clumsily edited together two versions of the story. They hold that in one version, the leader was Semjaza, and the other, it was Azazel. I think I've read that before. I think I've read that claim before, but it's interesting because he gives a different viewpoint on that. And so, however, true explanation requires no such hypothetical editing. Close examination reveals that 1st Enoch never states that Azazel was a watcher. 1st Enoch treats Azazel quite differently than the watchers, and his treatment is consistent with him being a seed of the watchers. Confusion about Azazel's role arises, at least in part, because he is immensely powerful, even more so than the watchers themselves. I am not alone in identifying Azazel as the seed of the serpent Lilith. The Zohar of Kabbalah implies Azazel is the seed of the serpent. And this would then make sense because if the high priest, when he places his hands upon the scapegoat and says Azazel for Azazel, and he he transfers all of the sins of Israel onto that goat, and that goat is sent out over a cliff to die. So basically it is showing that through Messiah, through redemption, through the Yom Kippur ceremony, the entire generations of the heavens, which are these demon seed, these demons that are persecuting mankind, they're overcome. They're overcome because Israel is covered now, is protected from them, just as believers of Messiah are protected from demons. Those who remain in Messiah. Okay, so However, the true explanation, okay, so let's see here. Or if I somehow lost a okay, so let's start here. However, the most conclusive evidence for identifying Azazel, the seed of Lilith, comes from the Bible itself. Leviticus 16 states the Yom Kippur scapegoat upon whom was cast all the sins of Israel was given to Azazel, whereas the goat who atoned for Israel was given to Yahweh. By carefully studying the Yom Kippur ceremony and its spiritual symbolism, one reaches the conclusion that Azazel must be a rival to Messiah. He therefore meets all the requirements for being the infamous seed of the serpent seed. So the serpent seed are the generations of the heavens. Why does it say generations of the heavens? Because the watchers came from heaven and they had sex with human women and produced the race of the giants. The flood destroyed the giants, and their spirits are demons roaming the earth. A lot of those demons were put down there in hell. But according to the book of Jubilees, Satan says, hey, you can't lock up all these, because how am I going to use them to torment the sinners? And so according to Jubilees, Yahweh relents and says, okay, you can have a small portion of demons on the earth to torment the wicked and those who violate your commandments. That's essentially the story there. All right, so 6.1, accounts of the Nephilim. There are two primary ancient sources of information on the Nephilim. First, Enoch and Genesis. First, Enoch is dedicated to describing the entire episode of the Watchers and their Nephilim offspring. It relates that the Nephilim were a powerful race who nearly pushed man to extinction. It was because of the Nephilim corruption to the human bloodline that Yahweh brought about Noah's flood to cleanse the earth of their defilement. So, you know, when people talk about, oh, the flood was just so serious, it was so severe. I mean, Yahweh's a mean guy. He destroyed the earth. You know, he mostly destroyed were these hybrids, these demon seed that were these grotesque creatures, you know, and they were causing the great violence on the earth, and they were teaching mankind how to make weaponry and how to oppress and how to do all of these wicked deeds. And so the whole earth was, so it's like, because it says in Genesis that Yahweh came down and the whole earth had perverted its way. And so that's why he decided to give the flood. It was a very serious situation. The Nephilim are also covered in Genesis somewhat briefly. Genesis 6 states that after men multiplied upon the earth, the sons of God went unto the daughters of men and bore children to them. So when it says sons of God, it's talking about heavenly beings. Okay, these children were the Nephilim. Scholars commonly recognize the biblical phrase sons of God refers to angels. Thus, Genesis 6 speaks of angels descending to the earth to mate with human women. This interpretation of Genesis was widely spread among the ancients. So the ancients believed this. The first century historian Josephus confirms the Genesis account speaks of the events detailed in First Enoch. Now, the book of Enoch was well regarded by the first century believers, and it was kept and maintained. And there is a church today that has the book of Enoch. Now, I went to a tour study today, and they are 66 books only, 66 books. I said, who authorized the 66 books? Nobody could give me an answer. I said, did you know that it's only Protestant churchianity in the West that has 66 books? And that the world churches, they all have a different canon. And they're started by one of the apostles or one of the successors to the apostles. And the Ethiopian church, guess what? They've got First Enoch in their canon. And there's even a Third Corinthians. So the 66 book thing is suspect in my mind. I'll put it kindly, is suspect. Because it's limiting. It's very limiting. So anyway, the New Testament, and it's interesting that Josephus confirms this from the book of Enoch. The New Testament also supports First Enoch's rendition of events. Jude 1:6 confirms First Enoch and Genesis claimed the sons of Yahweh were angels who left heaven to cavort with women. Okay, Jude 1:6, and angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he, that's Yahweh, hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, under the judgment of that great day. Now, I got stumped a little bit because one guy that was arguing with me, he said, well, where are these, who are these demons down below? He says, well, these are these fallen angels down below. What I should have said is these are the 200 that came down to Mount Hermon, and Mount Hermon, and they were put down in chains. But I don't know, I got confused at the moment. In the moment, so 2 Peter 2:4-5 also refers to the watchers. It warns that Yahweh will not show mercy to false prophets, just as he did not spare the angels that sinned in the days of Noah. So, who are these angels that sinned? He's talking directly about this event that happened in the book of Enoch. This is why one of the things I said to the guy, I said, look, the book of Enoch is quoted multiple times or referenced multiple times in the New Testament. They believed the book of Enoch. They accepted it. Okay, so let's see, it warns that Yahweh will not show mercy. Okay, so this is for if Yahweh spared not the angels of sin, but cast them down to hell and delivered them chains of darkness to be reserved of the judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Okay, so Peter 3:19-20 also references events portrayed in First Enoch. It refers to Yeshua visiting and preaching to spirits cast in prison since before the days of Noah's flood. This is apparent reference to the imprisoned watchers. In First Enoch, they begged the prophet to petition on their behalf to Yahweh in order to secure forgiveness for their actions. However, Enoch rebuked them, saying he was but a man, and who was he to petition for angels who were sent to look after a man? Now, remember, in Enoch, these fallen angels that are down in chains, they're petitioning Enoch. Hey, make petition for us. We want to get out of this mess. But Enoch can't do it. Enoch's inability to petition for the angels stands in contrast to Yeshua, who Peter reminds us visited these angels with authority to preach and forgive sin. Now, that's an interesting interpretation of that verse in Peter, by which he, Yeshua, went and preached unto the spirits in prison, which sometimes were disobedient, while once the long suffering of Yahweh waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Now, I've often thought that referred to Yeshua descending into the Abraham's bosom and preaching unto the righteous souls there. But and then because that's what allowed them to ascend to be with Yeshua, because it says that when Yeshua was risen from the dead, it says the graves were open and many souls of the righteous were walking around Jerusalem showing themselves to people. But it does not say what happened to those souls. We can assume, according to Peter, or rather Paul, that they became the first fruits of them which arose. That's what Paul says. They're the first fruits of them which arose. So, so that was my understanding. But it could be that Yeshua also preached to those angels that were bound in chains. That could be true too. Something to think about. Given the above apparent references to the watch of the New Testament, it certainly seems like the early church fathers agreed with First Enoch's main tenets concerning the Nephilim and the Watchers. Several modern scholars had noted the remarkable similarity between First Enoch and the theistic language and terminology found in the New Testament. This similarity is so strong for many centuries, it was presumed that Enoch was penned in the New Testament era. And that's a lot of these guys. They have no clue about the provenance. The provenance of Enoch is ancient. But this is one of the reasons why they said, oh, this was just penned by some scribe in the New Testament era. That's incorrect. However, copies found at Qumran now prove Enoch predates Christianity by at least hundreds of years. If anything, the New Testament borrowed from First Enoch, or an earlier source common to both. That's right. The book of Enoch was found in the Qumran scrolls. Let us now review the two main accounts we have available concerning the Watchers and the Nephilim. The first is the most detailed account available, which is 1st Enoch. We shall then compare this account to the careful reading of Genesis version. We shall see that although Genesis has fewer details concerning the events, Genesis supports every major element of 1st Enoch account of the Watchers and the flood. Okay, so this is the account of the Watchers in 1st Enoch. I'm going to make sure I get on the right page here. Okay. The ancient work that unquestionably provides the most details on the Nephilim and Azazel is the first book of Enoch, or 1st Enoch, sometimes called the Ethiopian Enoch. The book is an ancient Jewish tome dated to at least the 1st century BCE, and most likely much earlier. It chronicles the tales of the prophet Enoch and the Watchers, a certain group of angels that Yahweh had assigned to watch over the affairs of man after Adam's fall. The book holds that in the course of time, the Watchers became so infatuated by the beauty of the daughters of men, they gave up their first estate in heaven in order to descend to earth and have illicit sexual relations with women. This unholy union led to the creation of the Nephilim, and literally nephal in Hebrew means to fall upon. It's a violent term. It means like to fall upon with violence. And the Nephilim were violent. In fact, this could be also why Genesis says that as such were in the days the mighty men of old, the mighty men of old. It could be a reference to these Nephilim, Nephal, these characters. So they were a race of giants that roamed the Plephod world. Now, there are other texts that put these giants into 3 basic categories. You got the guys that are, maybe like 12 to 14 feet tall. Then you got the guys that are like even bigger. And then you got the building side guys. Okay. Now, interestingly enough, they're also described as, let me see if I can get, mark this here. I don't lose my spot. Also interesting enough, in other texts, it says that these Nephilim, they commonly had 6 fingers instead of 5 and 6 toes. They commonly had 2 rows of teeth. And there's other texts that seem to suggest that they had grotesque malformations, that they had, they were like kind of like a scientific experiment gone wrong kind of thing, Okay, so it is during the time of the Nephilim that Azazel suddenly appears on the scene. 1st Enoch reveals that Azazel was a major figure in corrupting man. He taught man the art of warfare, taught women the art of seduction and instigation of adultery. According to 1st Enoch, the Nephilim's supernatural strength and evil, aggressive nature threatened to push ordinary man to extinction. It is for these reasons that Yahweh, seeing the imminent disaster against Adam's lineage, intervened and destroyed the Nephilim with Noah's flood. At that time, Yahweh imprisoned Azazel and the Watchers in the earth, so that they might not repeat their mischief, and so that Noah and his seed might inherit the post-flood earth. Although 1st Enoch is considered an apocryphal work by most churches today, with the exception of the Ethiopian church, it considers it canon. It is perhaps the most highly regarded and accepted of all apocryphal works, except in my Torah study today. I don't accept it. Anyway, Yah bless them. As we shall see, its rendition of events concerning the Nephilim and Noah's flood as consistent with events discussed in Genesis and rabbinic tradition. Although 1st Enoch is not the part of the canon of scripture of most Jewish synagogues or Christian churches, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church does regard it as inspired scripture. I mentioned that. 1st Enoch's acceptance by the 1st century Jewish Essene sect at Qumran is confirmed by fragments from multiple copies found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So they understood about Enoch. All right, so 1st Enoch was also accepted by some early church fathers. In Jude 1:14, the writer reminds his audience of the prophecies of Enoch. His statement presumes that a record of these prophecies are known and circulated among his audience. Since no such prophecies are written in the Bible, the source to which Jude referred was quite possibly the version of First Enoch handed to us today. The main passages in First Enoch describing the fall of the Watchers encompass chapters 6 through 8. These rather brief chapters are listed in their entirety below. Chapter 6 reveals how the Watchers saw the beauty of the daughters of men and how they purposed to descend to earth, have sexual relations, and begat children with them. Samjaza, the leader of the Watchers, met with his brethren upon Mount Hermon, and he initiated an oath among all that they would go in unto the women and take for themselves wives. Verse 3 explains that Samjaza extracted this oath because he feared his fellow Watchers would abandon their plan after he'd committed some great sin, and he alone would end up paying the penalty. What this great sin is unspecified. One may suppose that it was the act of sexually going unto the woman, but why Samjaza would have to act before his compatriot is clear. Let's see here. Okay, based just on the text of First Enoch, the exact nature of the great sin Samjaza had to commit must remain at least a partial mystery. However, as we shall see, a complete analysis of all available material suggests that Samjaza had to sexually mate with Lilith and acquire from her the secret name of Yahweh before he and the other Watchers could mate and bear seed with the daughters of Adam. Now, that's an interesting part that I had not heard before. But I know that in Jewish mystical works, the ineffable name was used as, it was thought of as the thing that releases power. And so this is an interesting aspect here, that they would have to get the ineffable name and acquire from her the secret name of Yahweh. Before, but now remember, this is not in Enoch, and it's not in the New Testament, it's not in the Old Testament. These are things that Judaism says in the Zohar and some mystical works. Now, I don't think Enoch says this part. And the author acknowledges that. He says a complete analysis of all available material. So he's including the Zohar there. Okay, so chapter 7 reveals the Watchers did as they pledged upon Mount Hermon. They went unto the daughters of Adam and bare giants with them. These giants spread and began to devour and displace mankind upon the earth. It is at this point that Azazel suddenly appeared for the first time. So, in this understanding, Azazel is the progeny, the firstborn of this union of Samjaza and Lilith. Okay, and so this then is the only explanation I've found in all of my years of study to explain why the high priest would place his hands and commute all of these sins. He would transfer all of the sins of Israel upon the scapegoat and pronounce Le Azazel. In Hebrew, Le Azazel means for Azazel. And then a man would lead that goat out and then push it over. So I don't know of any other. And I asked the guy today at Torah study, I went to a private Torah study. I said, why does because he rejects Enoch. He rejects the understanding of the Watchers coming down and mating with human women, producing the race of the giants. Apparently, maybe he adheres to some serpent seed amalgamation, some other way, some kind of racial identity thing. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not sure. I didn't question him about that, so I don't know. But what I do know is that I asked him, well, what about this? I mean, why? He had no answer. So this is an answer. This is an answer for why that is. The more I read about it, the more pieces begin to come together for me. Okay, so chapter 7 reveals the Watchers did as they pledged upon Mount Hermon. They went unto the daughters of Adam, bare giants with them. These giants spread and began to devour, displace mankind upon the earth. It is at this point that Azazel suddenly appears the first time. First Enoch 8:1-2 reveals that Azazel taught men the art of war and women the way of harlotry. Because of him, there arose much ungodliness. Azazel's corruption of man apparently greatly exceeded that of any watcher, even that of Samjaza, who is listed after Azazel. Only 3 words are used to describe Samjaza's feats in corrupting man. This is in contrast to 2 entire verses dedicated to Azazel's acts. Okay, so here is First Enoch 6:1. And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, and in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heavens, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. Now, I should note here, every culture in the world, outside of Christianity even, I'm talking about every culture, the Romans believed this, the Greeks believed this, the Persians believed this, the Babylonians believed this. If you go back in history, every culture, number one, there are similarities. One is they all believe there was a flood. Number 2 is they believe that there was some kind of meshing of God and man to produce mighty men of old. Okay, where did Hercules come from? The study of Hercules. All of that is based upon this right here. That Enoch seems to talk about. And Samjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you not agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And so even Samjaza, he knew it was a sin. As Jude says, they left their heavenly estate. They left their heavenly state and got physically involved with human women. And so that caused great judgment upon them. And they all answered him, said, Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swear they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. Imprecations meaning that there would be curses upon them if they failed to do it. And they were all in 200 who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Now this says days of Jared, so that would be interesting to look up in Genesis to see about this time where Jared is. In fact, I think I'd like to do that right now. All right, let's take a look at that. See if we could find him in here. Okay, look at that. All right. Okay, and Canaan lived after he begat Mahalalel 840 years, and begat sons and daughters, and all the days of Canaan were 910 years, and he died. And Mahalalel lived 65 years and begat Jared. So this is about the time that these fallen angels decided to make this pact and come down. So how many, so then we've got Methuselah, then we've got Enoch, and so on, and it comes to, Noah. Okay. Very interesting there. Okay, so, and they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders. Samjaza, their leader, Arikib, Ramil, Kokablel, Termlel, Ramlel, Daniel, Eskiel, Barakijal, Asel, Armoros, Batarel, Arnanel, Zaklel, Samsapil, Satarel, Turel, Jomjel, Sariel. Okay, so that must be there's chiefs of tens. Chiefs of tens, interesting. Okay, so how many you got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So it must be, are there 20 of them there? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay, so these are the chiefs of 10, because I thought 200 came down, so we're missing one. Who are we missing? It doesn't quite, it's giving me 19 here, but anyway, that was just a curiosity here. And all the others together with them took unto them wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to go in unto them and defile themselves with them. Then they taught them charms and enchantments and cutting of roots and making them acquainted with plants. You ever wondered about witches? Where witches learn their craft? Right there. How do witches, if you ever, now I never studied a book of witchcraft, obviously, but I do know enough about witches that they use roots and plants to cause hallucinogenic states so that they can converge with demon spirits and have powers. Okay. So this is what this is talking about here. And they became pregnant. They bare great giants whose height was 3,000. Now, this does not refer to natural medicine. I think it's referring to hallucinogenic stuff. They consumed all the acquisitions of men, and when men could no longer sustain them, giants turned against them and devoured mankind. They began to sin against birds, beasts, reptiles, and fish, and devour one another's flesh and drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Azazel taught man to make swords, knives, shields, and breastplates, and make known to them the metals of the earth, and art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments, and the use of antimony, the beautifying of the eyelids, and all the kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray and became corrupt in all their ways. Some Jaza taught enchantments and ruth cuttings. Amoros, the resolving of enchantments. Barachel taught astrology. Kokabel, the constellations. Azakiel, the knowledge of the clouds. Interesting. Arakiel, the signs of the earth. Shemasiel, the signs of the sun. Sariel, the course of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and the cry went up to heaven. Now, if you look at all of these things, if you think about technology, technology is based upon a lot of these kinds of knowledges that are put there. And this could be where the idea of great technology before the flood came from. And so now, if you there's even secular historians and so on who believe this. They believe that before the flood, if they accept the flood, before the flood were these kingdoms that were extremely technologically advanced. Now, Heinrich Däniken is one of these guys, and he wrote a book, Chariot of the Gods, and it's famous. It made it on the New York Times bestseller, and it literally shows these relics of what looks like an ancient battery, and he shows pictures of all these things that scientists can't explain. Well, if scientists can't explain it, it just goes into the dustbin. But there are some brave people that try to explain it. Now, his explanation is that aliens came down. Well, in a manner of speaking, he was right. The aliens came down and that mankind was planted on this earth by aliens. I think that's his main idea. So that's obviously wrong. But I mean, kind of the idea of fallen angels came, watchers coming down and messing around with mankind, teaching them things they shouldn't learn for their own hurt. So much can be said about these critical chapters in First Enoch. However, for now, let us compare these passages against their counterparts in Genesis. Okay, so this is the parallel account of the Watchers in Genesis 6. The only direct mention in the Old Testament of the events involving the Watchers comes in Genesis 6, 1 through 8. These passages provide a very brief summary of events that are expounded in greater detail in First Enoch. As we shall see, the two accounts in First Enoch and Genesis are in complete harmony. Verse 1 and 2 of Genesis 6 reveal that as man began to populate the earth and have daughters, the Benai Elohim, that's the sons of God, saw that these women were fair, and they took for them wives. These Benai Elohim are generally acknowledged by most scholars to be angels. Although the various other explanations have been put forth with little success, I hold that Benai Elohim refers to angels in Genesis 6, can be firmly established from the terms other usages in the Bible. Every time Benai Elohim is used in the Bible, it clearly refers to angels. Okay, so this is in Genesis 6, 1 through 9. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. That's all we get, guys, 120 years on this earth. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of Yahweh came in unto the daughters of men, they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown. So this is clearly a reference to these giants, like these Hercules creatures, that they had incredible strength. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagining of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented Yahweh that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And Yahweh said, I will destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air. For it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. And then these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations, and walked with Yahweh. Okay, so verse 3 of Genesis 6 confirms that the Benai Elohim taking wives of man was a momentous event in Yahweh's eye. The verse relates that after this happened, Yahweh began to display displeasure with men. According to the King James Version translation, Yahweh apparently declares that he wearies of contending with man, for man is but flesh. And for that reason, Yahweh limits man's life to 120 years. Well, think about this. One of the things that the fallen angels taught mankind was writing too. I notice he doesn't mention that here. But through the availability, how did the atom bomb come about? The nuclear bomb. Did they just suddenly dream this up? No, it was the writings of one scientist, and then the scientist took those writings and built upon his research, and then another scientist took his writings and those writings and built upon his research, and then another scientist and another scientist. Pretty soon you've got enough knowledge, you can build an incredibly destructive bomb. And that's the idea being conveyed here. The destructive potential was enormous, and Yahweh had to send a flood. And it's interesting, the parallel here, because it says that except if Yahweh were to tarry beyond what is allotted, no flesh would be saved. Have you ever read that? Let me see if I can call that up here. All right, let's see here. I think it's in, yeah, okay. This is in Matthew 24. I don't know why that didn't. Okay, so where does it talk about this? For then shall great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world. This is how we know that it wasn't all done in 70 AD. The preterists are abjectly wrong. Because guess what? There's been greater Holocaust than 70 AD. There have. But this last one is going to be the mother of all Holocausts, the mother of all tribulations. For then shall great tribulation such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. That's how we know that it's the end time one. And except those days should be shortened, there shall be no flesh be saved. This is the problem. This was the conundrum of the flood, of why Yahweh had to send the flood. And this is why Yeshua has to return. He's going to return in the nick of time. Except those days be shortened, should no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days shall be shortened. And Messiah is going to come right in time to save the world. And but there is a promise that he will never send a flood again, but it does say he will cleanse the world with fire. And that could be a reference to him consuming the wicked, as it says in Revelation. But going back to verse 3 of Genesis 6 confirms that the Benai Elohim taking wives of man was a momentous event in Yahweh's eye. The verse relates that after this happened, Yahweh begins to display displeasure with man. According to the King James translation, Yahweh apparently declares that he wearies of contending with man. For man is flesh. Every time somebody comes in here, this thing does this little whirligig. It takes me a minute to get my screen again. Okay, so, but for reasons, Yahweh limits man's life to 120 years. Well, I said because of the accumulation of knowledge. You can learn too much. And the problem is knowledge is it can be, the more knowledge you accumulate, the more it can be misused. Now, a more precise translation of the underlying Hebrew is even more profound. This underlying Hebrew is difficult, but my best literal translation is given below. Okay, so, and Yahweh said, not shall strive my spirit in Adam, forevermore, hidden in their wayward erring itself is flesh. Therefore shall be his days 120 years. All right, interesting. So of that, okay, so and here it is in Hebrew. Vayomer Yahweh lo Yodin shall strive. Rachi, my spirit. Be'adam le'olam, for hidden forevermore. B'shagem, in their wayward erring, who itself of that. Bashar is flesh, or basar. I think that's a scene. Bahiv, and shall be his day. This is Yamaiv, his days. I think it's probably Yamo. It's probably a whole M there. Let's see. Me'ah, yeah, Me'ah is 100. Okay. The Esrim is 20. The Esrim is 20, and then Shana is years. All right, so that isn't that interesting? And said Yahweh, not shall strive or judge my spirit in Adam, for hidden forevermore in their wayward erring itself. So basically, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of in the New Testament, it says that, if you continue to do evil, that Yahweh will try to get you to repent. He'll try to get you to repent, but eventually he gives you over to a perverse spirit. If you keep being disobedient, he'll give you over to a perverse spirit. And that's what's the LGBTQ. They vaunt themselves against Elohim. They rebel. I've seen signs that are held by these people. They say, we're going to have a party in hell. Just imagine saying that. We're going to have a party in hell. If I'm going to hell, I'm going to party. Oh boy, little do they know. There's going to be no party in hell. All right, so let's see here. Have you ever considered 120 years refers to 120 Jubilee cycles? Well, this is talking about the lifespan of mankind, but it also could have allegorical meaning. It could mean 120 Jubilees throughout the 6 days before the Atid Lavo. That's something to think about. I don't know. Okay, so let's see. I've gone over an hour here. Any comments? Come on the mic, say something. Okay, let's see here. Any thoughts? Well, we got some text here. You said, "Oh, you did fine, Vicky." I appreciate the comments. All right, guys, I'm getting tuckered out. I didn't think I'd even be able to do this, but it's 9:41. I want to highlight this if it'll let me. I definitely got to download that program on this. On my other computer, I've got it downloaded, but this one I don't. We'll leave that like that. And I want to make a, get rid of, okay, so we go here. Okay, that's where we leave off the next time. All right, guys, you have a great night. This has been a wonderful Sabbath. I'm so tired now because, first I went to the Yahad service from 11, and then we carried on until 1 o'clock. That was 2 hours. Then I drove a half hour. We started at 2 and we didn't end until 7. Then I drove back. I started this a little after 8, and here we are almost an hour and a half later. So I've been teaching all day long, either teaching or learning. So anyway, guys, I hope you guys have a great night, and Yahweh bless you, and shalom, shalom.